You are listening to Apparitions and Alibis. I am your host, AJ Stallman. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not, thanks for returning. I love you. I apologize for lack of activity on our Instagram as well as pushing out episodes. We have upgraded our podcasting equipment and it took a minute to get all of our stuff together and all that jazz, but we are back and ready to own the world. Speaking of the world, hello to our new listeners from Italy, Russia, and Sweden, and hello to my brother Jamie in Italy if you're listening. Hug Georgia and the babies for me. Speaking of family, I have aunts and uncles and cousins in Ohio, so that is where we are going this week. A spooky prison that has been the backdrop of multiple movies such as Tango and Cash, Air Force One, and the Shawshank Redemption. That's right, the Ohio State Reformatory. So I have my coffee, I have my dogs and a cat, and I have my honey bagel. Let's do this. Have you ever thought about making your own podcast? Is there something that the podcast world is just missing that you want to put in it? Well, do what I did and download Anchor. If you haven't heard of it, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's totally free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast, and it's all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Located in Mansfield, Ohio, construction on this building started November 4th, 1886. The land it was built upon was once the site of a training ground for Civil War soldiers named Camp Mordecai Bartley. Before being built, the local community and political enthusiasts pushed for the reformatory to happen. Once built, the reformatory would boost the local employment rate and the economy. The building structure is based on a more cathedral look. The thought behind this was that being in a place that looked more uplifting would in turn uplift those who entered its gates. That it would help better themselves morally just by being in the structure. When it finally opened in 1890, the building was considered intermediate. This is a facility where first-time offenders who were too violent for industrial schools could serve their time. Inmates were given a high school education, taught basic trades for release and reintegration into society, and they were presented with religion. By the 20th century, the prisoner population began to grow, and the reformatory was made to accept inmates convicted of much more serious and violent crimes. Once a place of learning for boys and men alike to reintegrate back into the world, was turned into a maximum security prison. Fun fact, the reformatory houses the world's tallest freestanding steel cell block at 6 tiers and 600 cells. By the 1960s, the place was crowded, and we all know that overpopulation makes for conflict and disease. At one point, guards had to double the occupancy in death row cells, resulting in at least one inmate's death. During morning checks, guards noticed a prisoner was missing from one of the cells. Once inspected, the inmate's body was found broken and bent, stuffed beneath the bunk. Similar instances forced Ohio State Reformatory to close its doors around the 1990s. While day-to-day life within the walls were enough to darken the sight, there were events that are attributed to the paranormal activity within the prison. In the 1930s, a riot broke out in the East cell blocks. The guards condemned 120 rioters to share 12 solitary confinement cells for 1 week without food or water. That is 10 persons stuffed within a cell meant for only one inmate. The horrible confinement drove many inmates to madness and even death. Another tale is of the prison hole. The hole is a small cell in which prisoners were held for 3 days while they were being punished. The hole was kept at 93 degrees and the lights were kept off, only to be turned on if there was an emergency. Some sources say that there could be up to 3 prisoners at a time in the small holding area. Sometimes one inmate wouldn't make it through those 3 days, dying in the hole. Besides the hole, there were other torturous ways to deal with misbehaving inmates. The sweatbox, which is exactly how it sounds, and the butterfly, which is an electrical shocking device. Another site referred to a method called water tubes, and I tried to look it up because I had no idea what it was, but I only found porn sites. So that is something I refuse to venture into. There were rats the size of cats. Inmates actually had to create a barricade to cover their toilets so that when they slept, a large rat wouldn't come up through the pipe and scratch them. However, this didn't always stop the rats, and guards would hear the men screaming that there were rats in the tiny cell with them. James Lockhart was an inmate that is believed to have been bullied and threatened by his more violent cellmate and neighbors. To escape a possible death at their hands, he decided to take his own life. He stole a turpentine can and set himself on fire. The fire was so much that all anyone could do was to watch him slowly and painfully die from the flames. Larry Hamer was an inmate that was 1 week away from being moved to another facility. He never told anyone why, but he made a noose out of his bed sheets and tossed himself over the railing, hanging himself. Many people assume maybe the next location he was going had a fate worse than death waiting for him. During its 94 years of operation, 154,000 prisoners passed through the doors of the Ohio Reformatory. Many died of diseases such as influenza and tuberculosis. Some went mad. But the bloodiest incident happened outside of the prison walls. Connected to the Reformatory are the Mad Dog Killers, 2 men who went to Ohio State Reformatory and got out. Robert Daniels, 24, and John West, 22, met while serving time at the Ohio State Reformatory. Daniels was classified by prison officials as a psychopathic personality, but with average intelligence. He was sent to the reformatory for an unarmed robbery. John West was classified as a moron, with an IQ of 60, and the local newspaper called him gun crazy. He was sent to the reformatory for grand larceny. They were released in the summer of 1948 for good behavior. When Daniels met up with West, Daniels' mother begged him not to go. She stood on their residence steps crying as he left. Together, they committed a crime spree that took the lives of 7 individuals. They stole a 2-tone Pontiac, robbed a gas station, beat the clerk to show how tough they were, and began their journey. July 9th, right before midnight, they walked into Joe's Grill. Customers spotted their guns, and some were able to escape through the back door. West fired his .45 without hitting anyone, and then emptied the safe and the cash register before fleeing. From there, they stopped at a tavern owned by Earl Ambrose. They entered through the back door, announcing the robbery. Earl attempted to run, but West shot him in the back 3 times. Earl died instantly. A female patron was also shot, but luckily survived. The pair got away with $8,000. However, a bystander got a good glimpse of their license plate and was able to write it down and give it to the police. They avoided law enforcement for a week, all while planning their next move. After the robberies, the men traveled through St. Louis, Nashville, Kentucky, and Michigan. On their road trip, their time was spent picking up the ladies, drinking, and doing some small robberies to keep their funds and rebellion up. While in Michigan, they remembered a plan that they had concocted during their prison days. They were going to return to Ohio and kill former prison guards who treated them wrong during their stay. Their focus was largely on Willis Harris. Once in Mansfield, the murderers found a hiccup in their plan. They didn't know where Willis Harris lived. Oh, but you know what? Harris's boss probably has his address. On July 20th, they arrived to the boss's home. John Nebel, his wife Nolanda, and their 21-year-old daughter Phyllis were all at home when Daniels knocked on their door. John answered, and Daniel told him that his car had broken down and needed to use a phone. When John let Daniels in, West pushed inside armed, and Daniels revealed his own gun. The men searched the house for any valuables and removed the mother and daughter from their respective bedrooms. The original plan was to get the guard's address from John and then kill the guard. But they needed several hours to do it all before John could call the police. Plus, they didn't know that John had a family. What about the wife and daughter? So they decided to take them across town to a cornfield, tie them up, gag them. That way they would have time to get to the guard's house. Before leaving the house, Daniels decided to rape Phyllis before forcing the family into the car at gunpoint. As Daniels and West drove the car to the location, they made the family strip naked in the car and throw their clothes out of the windows along the side of the road. Once at the cornfield, they realized yet another hiccup to their plan. They didn't have rope to tie the family up with. So instead, they walked the family deep into the field and shot them all. While on the run, the 2 men would steal another car, a Buick, to stump police, as well as take 3 more lives before the police caught up with them. During their capture, West was shot in the forehead and died at a local hospital, while Daniels went to jail. There's a video interview where Daniels is asked how many murders he committed. He simply replied, "I got my share," and winked at the camera. Now, Daniels wasn't the ugliest guy on the planet, and boy did this heifer know it. During his trial, 87 of 100 seats would be filled with women waiting for him to turn and wink at them, which he did often. Not long after he was caught, Daniels was stated that he would fry for his crimes. And he wasn't wrong. Daniel would be killed by the state via electric chair January 3rd, 1949 at 8:09 p.m. Before I get into the hauntings of the building, I would like to take a moment and talk about the hauntings on the road. Phoebe Wise had her own sense of fashion that was not the norm in her town. She wore bright clothing that was out of fashion and was deemed to be gaudy. Many neighbors got to see Phoebe, often as she loved to walk to get everywhere. And if the reports are true, she stood over 6 foot tall, so she was very easy to spot. But what really made Phoebe so different from other women was her outspokenness. She had no problem saying what was on her mind, and she had no problem going to head with any man. The Weiss family owned a large plot of land, and it was on this land that Phoebe chose to live in an old shack away from everyone. So, besides being seen walking on the side of the road, she really kept to herself and didn't get out much. But in the 1880s, she met and started dating Jake Kastanowitz. By many sources, the relationship was tumultuous from the very start, and violent arguments were not uncommon. Excuse my puppy, he's trying to fluff up the carpet so he can lay on it. So weird. On May 22nd, 1898, the violence finally bubbled over, and Phoebe shot and killed Jake. Later, it was found that it was an accident and she didn't mean to shoot him, but the incident did confirm that she was not a lady to be messed with. The Ohio State Reformatory owned the land beside the Wise family parcel, and when the state wanted to extend the prison, they approached the family and a transaction was made. Since the state seemed to have decent money, people around town assumed that the Wise family had become much more wealthy. But when Phoebe continued living in a quiet little shack, rumors began that she chose to hide the riches her family had come into, even that the money was hidden in her shack for safekeeping. Soon a group of thugs heard the rumor and went to see for themselves. After forcing the way into her home, they assaulted her and began to loot the shack. They found nothing of what the rumor said, so they took what little money Phoebe had, some of her jewelry, but not before brutally murdering her. As a result of this violent death, Phoebe Wise's spirit is unable to rest. It is said that she walks up and down Reformatory Road. Luckily, if you go looking for her, she'll be really easy to spot. Now we can move on to the hauntings of the building. Not all of the spirits that reside in the Reformatory are inmates, though. One was the superintendent's wife. Helen Bauer and Arthur Gladdick met in 1934 during a campaign. In 1935, they were married. At the Reformatory, they lived in the front, away from the dreaded cell blocks. Around 10 a.m. on November 5th, 1950, Helen was getting ready for church. The official report says that while she reached up into her closet to retrieve a jewelry box, she accidentally dislodged a hidden .32 caliber semi-automatic handgun. It fired a bullet into her left lung as it hit the floor. She died 2 days later from complications from the injury at the age of 41. Rumors began circulating around the prison about the superintendent committing adultery, and that there had been verbal arguments on the subject just the night before. It was whispered that Helen had come home early from work to discover that stuff was going on, and she demanded a divorce. Some say that Arthur simply had to kill his wife to cover up the affair and, not damper his career. No evidence was ever found to prove it could have been anything more than an accident, although a number of gun experts have stated that it's really unlikely a .32 caliber semi-automatic pistol could have discharged in the manner it said in the official report. But unlikely doesn't mean the same as impossible. It is said that Arthur was actually haunted by Helen after she passed. Ever since her death, there have been reports of a ghost, thought to be her, roaming around the facility. Even when the prison was still in operations, employees and visitors said they smelled her rose perfume wafting through the hallways where she once lived. Ghost hunters have even caught glimpses of her walking through her pink bathroom, as she did many times while still alive. The souls of inmates have not left the building and are not easily silenced. Tour guides and visitors alike have been pushed and even punched by unseen forces. Visitors often feel a chill while on the prison grounds. Witnesses have heard cell doors slam and have seen apparitions doused in darkness. According to the Reformatory website, the following are the top 8 haunted areas within the building walls. The east wing of the first floor, mainly the toilet room and the east showers. This area is good for experiences as well as evidence being caught during ghost hunts. And more often than not, people experience shadow people when investigating. The third floor admin area. There are many shadow people, audible voices, footsteps, and the feeling of not being alone. The sub-basement. This area was avoided even when the building was still in operation. I'm guessing it's just because of the energy of it. The chapel. Grabby ghosts reside here and is said to make skeptics a little less skeptic. One visitor states that they felt as though something was lingering in the darkness of the shadows, possibly wishing harm upon them. The West Attic. According to their website, a very well-known celebrity had an experience in this area. They wouldn't say who it was, only that he grabbed his scarf and walked out. I wonder who. Admin basement. Here there are 2 different entities, a nice one and one that's not so nice. According to the lore of the prison, a 14-year-old boy was beaten to death in this basement. You can see his shadow dance on the wall when you're down there. You can very easily determine which energy is his, as it is light, and which energy is not his. Opposite the young boy is something unnerving, unsafe even, odd, for it being possibly a guard that killed the young man. Cell blocks, east and west wing. There isn't a lot of information of what happens here, only that grown men have been brought to tears. With so many murders and suicides in this area, I can only imagine the energy and atmosphere that people must feel walking in there. Solitary confinement, aka the hole. Many men took their own lives here. People now who enter the hole have been said to experience nausea and cold spots. Another area that has its own spooks is called the chair room. In this windowless room, there's only a chair placed in the middle. If you move the chair, it will soon move itself back to the middle. It is also said that if you sit in the chair and provoke or harass the dark force that you feel watching you, you will leave with scratches down your back. And that is just the tip of the Ohio State Reformatory iceberg. Ugh. That Robert Daniels grinds my gears. How do you wink at a camera while admitting to taking people's lives? And as for the gentleman who burned himself alive, I want to say I can't imagine the pain, but I've also heard a couple reports that say after a certain amount of time the nerves are dead and the person doesn't feel the burning anymore, but it still sounds absolutely horrible. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure to subscribe and review us on iTunes. It really does help. And follow us on Instagram at Apparitions and Alibis. I hope you enjoyed this week's spook, and I will talk at you later. Bye.